Good evening. My name is Mike Fagelman, and I'm the Executive Director of HonestReporting Canada. Thank you all for joining us for tonight's Insider Briefing webinar. During and following the 11-day conflict between Israel and Hamas, the TikTok Intifada was born, with videos encouraging people to attack Israelis and to assault Jews worldwide. These toxic messages went viral in what's been described as the social media pogrom. In a concerted effort to give you the tools to help you to advocate for Israel, we've organized this important briefing to help you to understand the dangerous relationship between social media and celebrity influence. Celebrity influencers like Bella Hadid and Dua Lipa use their social media platforms and their huge followings to single out Israel for a program to foment discord and to fan the flames of hatred. Now we're going to learn what we can do to combat that. And now I have the great pleasure and honor of introducing you to HRC's co-founder and chairman, Mr. Jonas Prince.
Thanks, Mike. Tonight's a very exciting night for me and for Honest Reporting. Our insider briefings are designed to bring in amazing people to talk about the issues we care about that affect us the most, and particularly those issues that relate to the survival of the state of Israel. And nothing could be more threatening than the world of social media. It's an area, quite frankly, in Honest Reporting we haven't covered. We cover the news, the mainstream media, but we have now decided we will be covering social media and its evil, venomous narrative it has created. And we'll hear a lot more about that tonight. And to help us navigate this territory, there can't be anybody more qualified than Noa Tishby. Noa Tishby is I'll call her a warrior. I don't know if she'd like me to call her that. She calls herself, she's an actor, she is an author, and she is an activist. And I'm not sure in what order, but my guess is activism is taking the predominant role. She was, I don't do long introductions, so apologies for that, Noa, but she was a well-known superstar, TV, music star in Israel as a young kid, moves to LA, and for the last 20 plus years has been in LA in the Hollywood scene. So first of all, Noa, welcome, and thank you so much for agreeing to do this tonight.
Thank you so much. I'm glad to be here.
Well, I want to jump in on the activist part, and we'll talk about actor and author a little bit later. But on the activist front, your friend, Eve Barlow, calls this war, the last 10-day war, the 11-day war, the first social media pogrom. And Hollywood went into overtime on Instagram. What is it about the Hadid sisters that merits 103 million followers combined? And what did they do that got you so riled up? And was that an appropriate response? Was it good enough? And did it go far enough?
So what merits them having so many followers? I don't know. People are obsessed with celebrities and they are pretty good models. So, you know, their profession, they're good at their profession. So they're able to amass this type of followers. And to answer your question, no, it's not enough what I'm doing. And it wasn't enough to respond. And as much as I went hard on her and her friends, and as much as it got a lot of views, it got over 1 million views without any professional help, let me put it that way, it's definitely not enough. One of the things that I said in that video, and I keep saying all the time, is that there are more, Bella Hadid has 4 times more followers than the entire Jewish population of the world. And that is a number that should really resonate with anybody who cares about the state of Israel and the future of the Jewish people and like Western civilization at large. Okay, so it's what's been going on in social media is absolutely horrific. And the fact that this is where the majority of people of a certain age get their news, get their information, get their knowledge should worry anybody and everybody. So Eve Barlow is correct. This is a social media pogrom. They are basically trying to do to Jews online what they've been doing to Jews for millennia, which is extract Jews from social circles and from life itself, congregate them, put them in, you know, tales of settlements online. And as we've seen in the recent conflict, this doesn't stay online. This goes offline and it goes into reality. And it's something that we should all be very watchful towards. And it's also something I've been talking about for over a decade.
I know about this Prada.
Diet Prada.
Product. Can we put this up? I'd like, you know, I know part of me hates putting these things up to give it additional play, but I think it's important for people to see the nature of this misinformation. Dylan, do we have that slide, please?
Yeah,
I can't tell if it's up or not. I'm only getting one.
up. It's up. I see it.
And Dylan, can I get that? I'm not getting the screen I usually get, so I can't see it or read it. But if it's up there, is it readable? I'll let people just read that. But that's the insidious nature of this Instagram. And I want to, let's take that down. And I want to talk about the Hadid sisters weren't alone. They had a lot of friends. And I'll mention Dua Lipa, The Weeknd, Halsey, mainstream TV. You've talked about these people, John Oliver and Trevor Noah. So what is it that Hollywood camped on? And I'll just mention by contrast, I think it was what year was Vanessa Redgrave nominated?
Right. She was, yeah.
Talked about the Zionist hoodlums. That was pretty much the end of her career.
Yeah.
Here you have this camping on, this piling on, equally outrageous things, Mark Ruffalo, but there were a few people that walked back. So it's kind of interesting when I look at who the audience is. You did have Lewis Hamilton, race car driver, and a couple others that actually walked back their posts, maybe thought the better of it.
Mark Ruffalo actually walked back his post, calling Israel a genocide state, and put out an apology saying, actually, it wasn't. I'm so sorry about that. To which I replied in crass words that I wouldn't, I'm not going to quote here.
So there were those that came out hardcore, and my view is that they fall into two camps. One, people actually understand what they're saying, and those that just, camp on because it's good for their social justice warrior business cred. But then there's some that were kind of, I thought, fair, and I want to mention and read the Instagram for Gal Gadot. So because we're French speaking here, that's Gal Gadot to Canadians. And you say she's the largest superstar Israel ever had. My own polling puts you up there neck and neck. But let's just say she says this, and this is very interesting to me, and she within 30 minutes has 40,000 comments, mostly negative. So what did she say that was so negative? And she says this, I'm gonna read what she says. My heart breaks. My country is at war. I worry for my family, my friends. I worry for my people. This is a vicious cycle that has been going on for far too long. Israel deserves to live as a free and safe nation. Okay, pro-Israeli. Now she continues, our neighbors deserve the same. I pray for the victims and their families. I pray for this unimaginable hostility to end. I pray for our leaders to find a solution so we could live side by side in peace. I pray for better days. And she's chastised and she's hounded. This is like Switzerland making a statement.
Yeah. I mean, right? This couldn't be more peaceful. This couldn't be more balanced. This couldn't be more beautiful. But the thing is this. This is not how social media works. Social media works with working on our amygdala, on our greatest fears, and social media works on what is the quote unquote social media currency of the day. So what has been going on in the past 20 years at least is that BDS movement and other movements of that type have been infiltrating social justice causes in order to infiltrate the pop culture, like pop culture. So I know a lot of people that actually reposted that Diet Prada post, not even knowing and understanding what it was. And that thing just, everything, all of it caught fire. So the shift has been happening for, a few decades. So when Vanessa Redgrave said what she said at the time, it was very clear that she's wrong. But today, because we've kind of been asleep on this and haven't noticed what's been going on, this took hold, and it took hold in pop culture. And it was, look, you read my book, and I'm assuming, I think you have, we've spoken about this before. So you have read my book, and the reason I wrote this book is because I identified this problem. I knew, all of us that were working in this field knew that, pardon my French, but an SHIT storm is coming. Like, we knew this was coming, and we tried to warn people, and we're like, this is really bad. What's been going on with the liberals and the left in America is really bad. What's happening with social justice movement is really bad. I actually have a subchapter in my book called This New Hip Social Justice Cause, which talks about social media and BLM and From the River to the Sea and all of these things that have now are very apparent to everybody. So this is one of those things that weren't surprising to all of us that have been working in this field, but obviously took everybody by surprise and shook everybody, which I think at least now we're aware. At least now it's out in the open, so we may be able to actually do something about it. But yeah, social media works on fear and on catchphrases and on social currency. It's very hip to support, the current cause. It makes you look good, but people don't actually know what it is that they're supporting. And as we know, it has real life consequences and real danger for Israel, real danger.
I'd like to read you something from a book I've read that you'll find interesting. Speaking about, and it deals with where are the Jews in all this, and what are they saying? And what this says is, if you post anything even slightly positive about Israel, you'll be trolled to oblivion, attacked with millions of free Palestine comments and insanely vicious slurs. You may also become a target of the puritanical left, which has been permeated by the lingo of BDS. As a result, Israel is a hands-off zone for a lot of high-level individuals in the US. In my own adopted town of Hollywood, California, people will express their support of Israel privately to me, but will almost always shy away from speaking up publicly. So
just for anybody on the call that doesn't know where this is from my book, and the book came out a month before the conflict.
I want to talk more about this book in a few minutes.
But I wrote this is something I wrote before it became apparent. Like, I've seen this happening so many times. I'm not sure why this is that people are silent on Israel, that a lot of powerful Jews are silent in Israel. I'm not entirely sure. There are a lot of psychological reasons that I can try and explain, but I think enough is enough. Enough is enough. That's it. So I'm glad a lot of people are taking that stand right now. A lot of people that weren't involved. I had a lot of people reach out to me that are very high level individuals that have never been involved before and are now all about being involved, because they realize that this is not, anti-Zionism is not limited to the state of Israel. Anti-Zionism is anti-Semitism. And if you think they're not coming for you, you're wrong. And I think a lot of people understood that in the recent conflict. And at least that happened.
Well, there's a silver lining. We'll talk about that in a moment, but I want to come back to there was an open letter that you were part of from Creative Community for Peace. It's an organization in Hollywood. And I read it, and there were signatures in addition to yourself, Chaim Saban, Gene Simmons, Michael Bublé. We have some Canadian content in there, which is good. What struck me, and over 120 signatures, what struck me is not the 120 who signed. It's the powerful Jews in Hollywood who didn't sign. And so I don't want to mention names, but I will. And maybe they're doing other things. So I'll say this as a preface with my ignorance. They may be doing amazing things elsewhere behind the scenes. I don't know, but they haven't signed this letter. So where is Spielberg, Katzenberg, Eisner, Geffen? Where's Howard Stern, who's not bashful usually? And in contrast to that, our friend Mark Ruffalo has a 3.2 million signature petition, 3.2 million, that calls on the international community to impose sanctions on Israel unless Palestinians are granted full and equal civil rights. He doesn't say which Palestinians, where they are, how you get that. Doesn't matter. Of
course not.
Yeah, 3.2, 120,000, not a good score.
120.
120. How do we even the score? How do we do better?
I am not entirely sure. I know there are a couple of things that I'm personally working on, and this is the reason I wrote the book and the reason I'm doing what I'm doing. First of all, the number one most important thing for me is education. I think that, again, another one of the reasons that I wrote the book is because I realized that our community is not educated enough. Our community can't answer these questions. I keep saying this, if our community can't answer the question, like right off the bat, right? Why isn't Israel an apartheid state? Why isn't Israel a colonialist state? What happened in 1948? What happened in 67? If we can't answer this, why are we surprised when the conversation gets taken away from us by Bela Hadid? It's been thousands of years the Jews have allowed other people to define themselves. We can't allow other people to define who we are, what we are about. And there's something about this that Jews have always tried to kind of not assimilate, but like live in the societies and like put your head down and just let it pass and it's going to be okay. And be the good Jew. Don't rock the boat. It's over. Like it's time to actually speak up. And we need to educate ourselves. We need to educate our children. We need to send our children when they're going to college, they need ammunition. Like I said about the book, this is not a book, it's a community project, and it's not a book, it's ammunition. Like they need ammunition to answer these questions and they don't have it. And whereas a lot of Jews have kind of like an intuitive truth of like, I don't think Israel is a genocidal state, but I don't really know how to answer that. We have to correct that. So that to me is number one. And number two is obviously be vocal, and not just be vocal online, because I highly recommend to never get into like Twitter wars or fighting with trolls, because it's most likely bots. You're never going to convince anybody. Nothing good is going to come out of it. But where something good is going to come out of it and will come out of it is you talking, like you, everybody on this call, right? On this meeting, talk to your friends, talk to your colleagues, talk to your boss, talk to your coworkers, actually have conversations with the people around you, and one at a time, this can be shifted. That's what BDS has been doing. They've been going one at a time to like meetings in the ports of San Francisco, meetings with BLM. They've been doing this thing for a very, very, very long time. And we have to be able to do the same. A lot of us are just kind of like, we don't want to have uncomfortable conversations. Have uncomfortable conversations. You see one of your colleagues writing a tweet that is outrageous, reach out to him, not via Twitter. Just pick up the phone and be like, yo, let's talk about this. That I think is very powerful. And then an actual strategy needs to be done, like an online strategy and a full-on PR strategy to handle all of it, knowing full well that anti-Semitism is not going away, hasn't been gone in thousands of years, and it's probably not going away, but we need to be able to move the ball forward and not let what happened happen again. Because this, I always say that this, when I just moved to the US, right, and started kind of like dabble in advocacy, the conversation about Israel, the misunderstanding about Israel was all about like, oh, I didn't know Israel was modern, right? It was like, oh, like this cute kind of thing, right? And I've seen it shift from, is Israel modern or not, to, yeah, but is Israel like a state? Or is it like a settler colonialist endeavor that like needs to be dismantled? And that is when I realized, and I'm talking about a decade ago or so, that I'm like, oh my God, this is delegitimizing the right of Israel to exist as a Jewish state, the indigenous right of the Jews for Israel. And that is something that is extremely dangerous, because as we all know, countries in recent decades have not toppled because of wars. They've actually toppled because of internal or external geopolitical changes and transformations. And this is a seed that can actually create this imbalance that actually makes Israel like delegitimized. Very dangerous.
There's a more immediate danger I want to come to. And this, the 11-day war, if I call it that, was really, tipping point's not the right phrase, but it gave license like no other series of Instagram ever. And the way that I look at sort of COVID as an accelerator to companies. If you were a startup, you're going to be great. If you were about to go broke, it'll make you broke faster. This 11-day war accelerated things. And it gave license to people to take violent acts. And you and your 5.5-year-old son, Ari, who you just mentioned, I know we're sitting not far away from one of these violent incidents in LA. And we saw these attacks across the United States. So you go from Israel fighting a war against Hamas that people didn't like for whatever reasons, for all the reasons people don't like war. And now you can go attack a Jew on the street in any city in the world. That's a big gap that only exists with Jews. And this is something we've talked about before, that if the Chinese are torturing 1 million Uyghurs, people aren't running up to Chinese people on the street and beating them up, let alone saying the horrific things I don't want to repeat about what will happen to your wives and your children and all the rest of it. So why is this transferring? Is it in fact, what's creating this license to go attack Jews when it doesn't happen to anybody else, that we haven't seen that maybe since the 30s in Germany?
First of all, sadly, I don't think that it accelerated. I mean, I don't think COVID actually accelerated it. I think it was there, and it just what was there for a long time just came out. I don't know about the license to actually go and beat up Jews. There's no world in which I can actually explain this and how a person would make that jump and how a person would think that attacking any person is acceptable. So those people are probably hoodlums who get themselves in trouble in other areas of life, because how you do anything is how you do everything. It's not like he's an amazing person, except for that one attack on Jews that he did in the middle of the streets and whatever. Other than that, he's great. Right. But I really don't know what to say in terms of like, it's kind of like lighting up, like throwing a match into the fire of anti-Semitism that already exists, and being as irresponsible as promoting this misinformation, this demonization of Israel, and then people are jumping immediately to Jews. But Jews are, I think Yossi Klein Halevi actually said the Jews are that thing that you cannot explain. It's that thing that you cannot explain. So it's a different type of race. It's not racism per se. Anti-Semitism is very specific to Jews. It's like, I think I said that in the book. I'm not sure. I think I've quoted Barry Weiss saying it's not punching down, it's punching up.
Did say that. Which is
still very, it's very dangerous. And the last thing is that for some reason, Jews we've had a great in the past few decades. Right, we've had a great in America and in Canada. We've had a great role. We've had granted freedoms. Israel's been strong, and in the back of our minds, we know that there is a state of Israel and Jewish military. Seth Rogen to protect us should something happen. But we kind of fell asleep. And didn't realize that this thing is brewing from underneath us. This is brewing because of the actions of nefarious people that have an intent to actually dismantle Israel because of anti-Semitism and because of whatever, because they just don't want us in the neighborhood. And we've let this happen, and it came out. But I can't find a reason to explain to you how would a person get out of a car, ask who's a Jew, and with a metal rod beat them up.
Well, do you think that? I hate the word progressive because I think that's the last word I would use to describe these people. But the progressive left, the woke, the critical race theorists, intersectionalists who count everybody except, as David Baddiel says in his book, Jews don't count.
Jews, 14 million are around the world, yet we're not considered the minority. How did that happen?
Exactly. So. There's an interesting side. What troubles me, and we'll get to some recent surveying a little later on today, but the Jewish community itself that you'd think would galvanize this around this, and the tweet. Let me refer to Gil Troy and Natan Sharansky that were on.
By the way, I want to stop you for a second. This goes back to education. So the reason that a lot of the Jewish community didn't galvanize behind it is because a lot of them were going, well, is it true though? I don't know. Is Israel, I'm not sure. I don't know enough, was literally what they said. And my point is, well, educate yourself. Know enough. Pick up a book, any book, read the history. Know, and then you'll know that it's wrong. And then you'll know what to say. And then you won't let this happen again. But that's why so many Jews were quiet, and so many younger Jews were quiet. They were embarrassed by this and kind of like, does Israel have a right to exist? I don't know. I'm not sure, right? We're a generation that took Israel for granted. It's always been around, and it's always going to be around. Whereas, like, it's a miracle that didn't happen up until 73 years ago. We should watch it.
I can't agree more. I think that the narrative in the tweet is vague, and it's loose, and it's untrue. And
and also because it's a conflict region, right? It's a complicated region with a lot of failed countries around. So a lot of people kind of like, it's too much. I don't want to learn about this. So when it comes out from like the United Nations and like a lot of like people in academia, that it's like Israel's X, Y, and Z, you don't go and look at the United Nations like rate of like resolutions against Israel to understand, and the number of democratic and non-democratic states within the United States nations to understand that there's alternate motive there. And if you don't know the facts and the history, you start questioning yourself. And we start cursing ourselves as a Jewish community. So I don't know if this answers the question as to like, why isn't Spielberg more and Howard Stern more vocal? I'm not sure about that. I mean, I can guess, but it's not for lack of knowledge on their part. But like a lot of our community and a lot of the younger people that are on social media just don't know enough to answer these questions, don't know enough to give rebuttals. They don't know enough. Which
Well,
it's again, it's literally the reason I wrote the book, to speak to my people and be like, you guys, this is not a painful book. Just read it and get all that information so you can answer to your friends and your colleagues when they spew all this hate, thinking that they're progressives.
I couldn't agree more that it's the facts and the history are on our side, and it's not an option not to know the facts anymore. The only antidote, really, I think, to the social media is to learn that. Take some time. You've got to learn the facts. You've got to learn the history, and then otherwise you can't have a conversation. Yeah. Otherwise, I'm feeling depressed. Yeah. And I have to say, I read this book. I love this book. I've read a lot. I've read a lot of histories. You call yourself a sassy Ken Burns. I think that's pretty good. I think it's more than that. You've got your sense of humor and irreverence. Don't take away from the factual accuracy, the validity, the ease in which, the approachability in which this story is told. Not to mention the fun autobiographical elements that you thread through here. So I think that and I would tell people, having read a lot, if you're going to pick one book, which I keep giving them away, I keep ordering them and giving them away. If you're going to pick one book to get educated, and if you can, buy two and give one to your best friend so that person gets educated too, because it is a primer. There are other organizations doing work, but if you don't know the history, if you don't know how Jews got title and kept title, I hate to get legalistic. If you don't know about the Treaty of San Remo, if you don't know about the Treaty of Sèvres, if you don't know about Balfour in the preamble to the British Mandate of 1922, you can't make a point and you can't engage with people. So this is, and we'll come in a few minutes to some specifics of that narrative that need to be changed, but at a high level, I can't endorse this. We've had other authors on here, and I love their books, but I've never endorsed the book this much. So it looks like I'm, getting 10% of the books, but royalties of the book, I'm not. But it's a great book, and I hope you don't have to write a sequel.
Oh my God! Can you imagine? I hope maybe it's a great sequel. Here's how anti-Semitism ended.
Well,
the death of anti-Semitism by Noa Tishby.
I take a Jewish view of that. So I don't think we're going to end 2,500 years of anti-Semitism, but that's not our job. So I think from a Jewish perspective, our job is not to complete the task, it's to move the ball down the field. I don't think the ancient rabbis described it as moving the ball down the field, but however they said it, that's what the task is. I want to ask you, Gil Troy and Natan Sharansky, who had been on our insider briefing, had published a recent article in the tablet, and they talk about what they call the un-Jew, the un-Jew. And they talk about this, the way I interpret it, that to keep your social warrior status in your crowd, you have to disavow Zionism and almost the state of Israel. That you just have to zip up, and zipping up isn't good enough anymore. You actually have to disavow it. And so a segment out there, I spend some time in the world of contemporary art. I see it. There's a lot of pressure on art institutions, MoMA in the States. We've had a few in Canada, where if you're a Jewish director or a trustee and you fund an organization or you receive funding for an umbrella organization that is considered Zionist, there are thousands of artists writing a letter of protest. I'm not sure what they're protesting, but they're just protesting. And there's probably 3 in 1,000 who sign a letter that actually understand what they're protesting. So is this goes back to the education, and this goes back, I think, to a lot of people who sign on, don't really know. You tell a good story of your friend, I'm not good with Hollywood stars, Sarah Silverman, comedian.
Yeah, she's not my friend. I never met her. Actually, I did meet her one time at a party, but that doesn't count.
All right. But you straightened her out, right? You said, what do you mean you're supporting BDS? Tell us, social media. I want to just backtrack for a minute and just describe, we talk about social media. We have a wide group in our audience, not everybody may know what we mean. What are the largest platforms, and how do they get regulated? We know in the media, we cover the media, we see something that's untoward, we write a letter, there's a code of ethics, there's a code of guidelines, there's an ombudsman, we can complain, we can get a rectification, or we can get a retraction or something. What happens in the world of social media?
Nothing. None of that is the answer. So I'm the last person to be able to give like an overview of social media in a proper way, but bottom line, we've got the Facebook, Twitter, Instagram, TikTok, LinkedIn. Let's say those are the major ones. The social media companies' position, and this is a conversation that's been going on for a long time, regardless of the Israel conflict. It's true for vaccines. It's true for the insurrection of January 6th. It's true for everything. Social media is trying to. Their position is that they are like the city square, and they are about free speech. Other people's position is that they are the biggest publisher in the history of humanity, and as such need to be held accountable. If I'm working for Johnson & Johnson, whatever, and I want to put on an ad that says that Johnson & Johnson baby oil makes your hair grow, I'm not going to be allowed to do that because there's regulation. NBC is going to be like, no, thank you, right? None of this exists on social media. And as a result, we've seen this abundance, this petri dish of misinformation about anything and everything, really. And this is something that's a bigger conversation than just Israel. This is like, it's fragmenting humanity such that we cannot agree on reality anymore or facts. And this is something that's really big. If you are a person that don't believe in vaccines or do believe in aliens, or you don't believe in whatever it is that you believe in or don't believe in, you'll find your tribe, and you will have people validating your point, and you will have people disagreeing and agreeing and getting all rallied up and angry and upset and sad and feeling like you belong. Again, in the bigger conversation, this goes to like the lack of community, because people need to feel like they belong. And this is where they feel like they belong, when they belong with groups of people online that think the same way that they do. So this is the larger conversation. When it comes to Israel, this is very apparent to anybody who's noticing. So there is no regulation. I'm not sure, a lot larger people than all of us together are trying to fight that fight. I don't know where that's going to end. I obviously would have loved for them to have to be regulation of social media, some sort of regulation, because it's not, you can't, if I'm now going to produce that ad that says Johnson & Johnson makes your hair grow, I can put it on all social media. I can reach millions and millions of people, and like, it's not going to be taken down. And that is something that's very damaging. It's very damaging for the world, and it's obviously very damaging for the state of Israel. It's a very scary conversation, actually. This whole social media is in like how it's rewiring our brains, like what is it doing in terms of our community living, like, not, it's a bigger conversation, and it's very concerning, but we're talking about Israel now. But obviously Israel and the Jewish people are highly, highly affected by this deregulated war zone of social media. Anybody can say whatever they want, and that's it.
I think people need to understand these are private companies. So if the owner of Facebook that owns Twitter, that owns Insta, private company. So you want to use my private company? I'll make the rules.
Exactly. So they're not wrong. This is only where, it's only where, this is just where capitalism is going, maybe to like topple humanity. But no big deal. Keep your investors happy. No problem.
Well, there's a lot of that. In fact, there's a book out this week called The Ugly Truth by two reporters from the New York Times. Reviews just came out. I have not read the book, but what I'm reading about it is these two reporters say they, quote, show the repeated failures of the owners of Facebook to care about the harm they are causing in the world through the promotion of hate and information. And they quote examples of where they look the other way. Even when on the own rules is supposed to be taken down, it doesn't get taken down.
Yeah.
So that's
it's such a tough question as well, because they have a lot of people that are sitting and watching content, and there are a lot of reports on those people having severe emotional damage, because just imagine having your job be watching the worst stuff that's on social media. So there has to be some AI that has to be implemented with that AI that looks into video and audio. There has to be, this is we're in the wild, wild west. We're in the technological revolution right now, and we're living through it and we're creating it as we go. So we can't even imagine what the next year, 2 years, 10 years are going to look like. But there's no question that enough people are concerned about it, that maybe something will happen in terms of regulation, and hopefully it'll affect Israel as well. Because we're like front line. We're just like, we're on the butcher's block. Like,
let me ask you this. We know that the algorithms upon which these platforms are based feed you more of what you've already looked for.
Yeah.
So therefore, when you do your advocacy, who is your audience? Because you're not there's some people you're just not gonna persuade of anything. How do you reach on social media the people you want to reach? Who are you trying to reach, Noa Tishby?
So generally speaking, what I say, and I say this to everybody, and this is something that anybody who's listening right now can take, right? So out of 10 people, 2 out of 10 are completely brainwashed and are gone. So 2 out of 10, this is, by the way, anecdotal. I have not done the research. This is just from my own experience, right? So please don't take these numbers and put them in some research, because they're not. But that's, more or less my sense. 2 out of those 10 are brainwashed and they're gone. They're super aggressive. They're they're completely wrong. They are like, Israel's an apartheid state. Israel needs to be taken down. The Jews don't deserve a state. The Jews are not even a people. Why do they, there's a whole thing of like, Judaism is a religion. Why do you need a state? Again, trying to define for us who we are. We're not a religion. We're a peoplehood, but whatever. So 2 out of them are lost. 8 out of the 10, or whatever, 7, whatever, don't know. And they're on the fence, and maybe they're curious, maybe they don't care, but they're not holding that strong of a position against it. And those are the people that we should all try to talk to. I'm a very centrist person. I'm also a girl. I'm a woman. I sound like an American. I have the ability to reach outside of our bubble. But even if I don't, and even if my activism helps people, that's great. Even if it just helps our community, fantastic. That's it. We'll see how this continues. I hope to be able to reach as many people as I possibly can. I can just tell you, in Simon & Schuster, which is my publishing house, within Simon & Schuster and within the entire PR team, none of them are Jewish, and none of them have been to Israel, and they bought the book. So I knew that it has the ability to reach outside the bubble. I was very surprised when my publisher, my editor, I just had, anybody Jewish here? Not a single person. And yet they bought the book, they love the book, they promoted the book, they are behind it, they're thrilled with the book's success. So this has the ability to reach outside the bubble. I hope that with everything that happened, with this vitriol, this hate, this anti-Semitic attacks, I hope that a lot of people that are not in our bubble would be willing to listen now, would be more kind of open, because a lot of people were shocked by what had happened, by the attacks, by the social media attacks and the actual real life attacks, that people would be happy, like a little bit more open right now to listen to the truth. And again, it's a problem because, as you said, the facts are on our side. Unfortunately, the world has changed, so facts aren't that important anymore.
I'd like to come to what it is about the content. We talked about the social media. We talked about the celebs in Hollywood putting it out there, maybe why they're putting it out there, the progressive left, but we haven't talked about the actual content itself and what is so anti-Semitic about it. And it's anti-Semitic is not a particularly word I like because I think it's too vague. We'll talk about that in a moment. But
have you preferred Jew hatred?
Yeah.
Jew hatred?
Anti-Semitic was invented by a German in the late 1890s, German Jew, as a euphemism for Jew hatred.
Yeah.
And it had nothing to do with Semites or Semitism. So it just is a bad word that is too euphemistic. We'll get to that. Okay. Let me ask you about this. I want to know what is anti-Semitic about the argument of colonialism, of apartheid, and then I'm going to ask you about BDS, your 3 least favorite initials. But first, I'm a believer in definitions, and I think Sharansky probably had the best definition. There's lots of definition, IRA, the Jerusalem Convention, but let's start with, can we put up a slide just because it's hard for people to remember? The 3D, this is the famous 3D definition. Dylan, do we have a slide? Okay, so demonization, double standards, delegitimization. Can you just talk for a bit on each of those and then tell us about colonialism and apartheid and ethnic cleansing?
So this is a brilliant, it's a brilliant framework to work with, and I did put it in my book because I think it's incredible. So he's talking about, if you criticize the state of Israel, and which is completely legitimate, right? You don't have to love every government and every state. No one country is perfect, right? You criticize the state of Israel, this is perfectly fine. You can criticize the policies and people and whatever. It's all good. It's a single country in the entire region in which you could do that and stay alive. So that's totally legitimate. What he said is, if you display one or more of these three characteristics, this is an anti-Semitic attack. So the first one is demonize. So demonize would go for the genocidal state. Okay, when you call Israel a genocidal state, when there were 150,000 Palestinians at the establishment of the state of Israel, and now they're like 21% of Israel is Arab, that's literally, it's liable. It's blood liable. It's demonization, it's blood liable, right? Double standard couldn't be more apparent in what's been going on right now, because I don't know if you guys picked up and saw 60 Minutes last weekend about Syria, okay? So the 60 Minutes got a hold of the photographer who was hired by the Assad regime to photograph every single body that the Assad regime tortured and killed in the thousands, obviously was shocked by this and decided to smuggle all of this footage out. So there are thousands of documented bodies with eyes plucked out. Horrific. It's horrific. I watch, you can't even watch it, right? Double standard. Where is Bella Hadid? Where is Bella Hadid about the Palestinians that are in Lebanon and have no rights and are in refugee camps and can get elected and can get full jobs? Nowhere to be found. Okay, so double standard about Israel, the mother of all double standard. Okay, they will criticize Israel until the cows come home, and then this thing comes out on Syria, crickets. They'll criticize Israel until the cows come home, but a human rights activist journalist gets killed by the Palestinian Authority. And the Palestinians are going out on the street in Ramallah to actually protest against the Palestinian Authority. Cricket, right? Mother of all double standard. And delegitimization is delegitimizing the state of Israel's right to exist, which again is happening. When you say from the river to the sea, Palestine will be free, what else are you saying other than Israel doesn't have a right to exist? So all of these movements and Miss Bella Hadid are displaying those 3Ds, and bing, 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 bing. We have anti-Semitic slurs day after day after day, hour after hour. Ilhan Omar does this. Rashida Tlaib does this. So many people of power do this, no consequences. Bella Hadid does this, anti-Semitic attack, like anti-Semitic slurs, lies about the new prime minister, full-on lies. And then a week later, she's in Cannes and she's opening Cannes Film Festival and she's walking down the red carpet, and I just can't. I can't. It's shocking. It really is. So, criticize the state of Israel, that's fine. Display any of these, come on.
So what is there about, we don't have time to talk about all these things, but BDS, which Ephraim Karsh, the historian and writer, one of my favorite writers actually, says does not mean BB derangement syndrome. It does not mean that. So I want to get that off the table right now. So tell us about BD and why, and I think you call it the worst. This is like, this is the headline. All the other stuff comes underneath it. And I think this may explain this recent polling and how effective BDS has been to taint the minds of the Jewish population on campus who don't know the history, who don't know the facts, but they just buy into this narrative. So give us 3 minutes on BDS and why it's so insane.
Okay. So first of all, if you read one chapter in my book, just read the chapter about BDS. If you don't want to read the book, just read that one chapter, because I went deep dive on them. And I think that they're one of the most dangerous movements that the state of Israel and the Jewish people have ever seen. So BDS is the acronym for Boycott, Divestment, and Sanctions. They were reestablished in 2005 as a thought exercise, actually, by a guy who is calling for academic boycott on Israel while holding a degree from the Tel Aviv University. Irony, just a little bit, but don't worry about it. The problem with BDS is that they are saying that they're one thing, but they're actually another. So what BDS is pretending to be is that they're pretending to be, they basically concluded, they figured out that young American, Canadian, European adults are naive and not educated enough. And they figured out that they can affect their hearts and minds slowly around campuses. And they very rightfully concluded that saying, oh, we want to dismantle the single consistent democracy in the Middle East is not going to work, or like, yay, let's kill Israel is not going to work. So they cloak their dagger and they change their language to this woke language of freedom and justice. So they took the language from the Durban conference in 2001, okay, and trying to turn Israel into, first of all, a human rights issue rather than a conflict, okay, and second, brand Israel apartheid state like South Africa, with the clear intention of dismantling the state of Israel. They're not hiding it. The founder of BDS actually says this flat out and outright. They're not hiding it when they actually talk about their intentions, but they are hiding it on campuses. So they go into a campus and they say, justice for Palestinians, freedom for Palestinians, but they're not saying what it is that they're actually about. What BDS has done in the past, since 2005, is using intersectionality. They've infiltrated social justice causes. So they went into BLM, to Black Lives Matter, and they were basically like, Black Lives Matter, Palestinian lives matter too, and infiltrated through a lot of hard work these movements until they literally merged. I believe that BDS needs to be investigated by the FBI for connections to terrorism. Actually, I'm not the one who believes this. There's been a couple of congressional hearings by a terrorism finance expert who exposed the financial ties between BDS and sponsors of Hamas, okay? So they're basically operating as Hamas mouthpiece in the United States, free on campus, in plain sight, with nobody stopping them. That should be investigated. The IRS should investigate them for tax evasion because of the financial structure that they're displaying. And the Board of Education, Department of Education, needs to see if they allow a movement that calls for the destruction of the state on campuses. So, we've been, again, those of us who've been in this work for a long time, in this activism world for a long time, we know about them. We tried to warn about, we were going up against them. We were very concerned about them. And what I heard as a pushback a lot is like, oh, it's nothing. It's just on campuses. It's kids. They'll grow out of it. They'll be fine. And I'm like, no, you can't grow out of this thing if it's infiltrated into your brain at such an age. Like this is gonna be a backdrop of your political thought and agenda. And they're not actually, they cause chaos on campus, right? So they'll bring these things to a vote in the student council, like supporting BDS, boycott Israel. Now they know that it means nothing in terms of actuality, because the deans of the university is still from a certain generation. They're like, oh my God, shut up, right? Like I'm gonna veto that. But what they're doing is that they're creating this false sense of legitimate political debate, such that a person graduates college and he's like, yeah, free Palestine, for sure, absolutely. Now here's the thing. Everybody wants the Palestinians to live in peace. The biggest Zionists in Israel, and even the rightest of right wings in Israel, maybe not the rightest of right wings, but they're crazies everywhere, want the Palestinians to live side by side with Israelis. How we're going to get there is not through boycotting academia, goods, and it's definitely not through boycotting the Palestinians' right to eat ice cream. It really isn't going to help. That's not going to help. And by the way, BDS historically have hurt and damaged Palestinian people. There are 2.9 Palestinians in the West Bank and 450,000 Jews. By not allowing more collaboration, cooperation, exchange, financial exchange, getting people to know each other, what are you doing? Who are you hurting? The answer is they're trying to hurt. They're literally trying to dismantle Israel, and by that, they're doing this by hurting Palestinians. A lot of Palestinian people on the ground hate them.
Thank you for that.
Yeah.
And well amplified in the book. And I want to just ask one more question before we open it up a little bit. And we've got a bunch of questions here that are pretty good. Only one has to do with ice cream. So our narrative always starts on the defensive. We're not colonial because, we're not apartheid because, we're not ethnic cleansing because, and so we're always on the defensive. And I think about how do we proactively have a narrative that puts us assertive, and not just because the best defense is no offense, because de facto we've got the goods, we've got the history, and so it comes back to education. But we need, our ancestral land. This idea of indigeneity resonates with a lot of people. It's our ancestral land.
What's more indigenous? There's a whole rigmarole right now about indigenous languages, right? That the federal government is going to pay to restore indigenous languages, which is great. What's more indigenous language revived and indigenous people going back to their indigenous homeland than Israel and Hebrew and the reemergence of the state of Israel?
We never thought of ourselves like that, right? I mean, and it hasn't been important really till now to be able to know that history and to be able to say that. So this idea of education, ignorance of our own history becomes our worst enemy, I think, right?
Couldn't have put it better. 100%.
Okay, that's a good endorsement on that note. I can't do better than that.
No, it's perfect. It's perfect. I may use it.
You're welcome to use it. I have some questions. And of course,
hi everybody, by the way. I hate Zooms. I can't wait to see everybody in real life because I don't know how many people are in the room and people are enjoying it or not. And I love talking to people. So
loads of people and loads that will watch after. And August 9th, you have an open invitation to come to August 9th. If you're double vaxxed, you can be here.
I'm double vaxxed. I'm going to be in Israel.
Okay, well, when you're finished with Israel. So let me ask you a few questions. And I can't believe an hour's just about gone by here. But
oh my God. Right.
Let me ask you, I can't avoid being an ice cream fanatic. I have to ask, and maybe everybody doesn't know this, what in the world is going on with Ben and Jerry's? What are they thinking? And for them to buy into well, you explain, what's going on with Ben and Jerry's?
Just go to my Instagram and see basically the post that I just posted today, Noa Tishby at Noa Tishby on Instagram. Because I mean, I couldn't, first of all, okay. They just capitulated basically to social justice movements and to BDS, right? Because who are they helping with that? Again, who are they helping with that? First of all, it's a gift to BDS because when Ben and Jerry's, who are like probably like kind of liberal, like Bernie Sanders, he used to be Bernie Sanders, Jews, who knows? They used to be supporters of Israel. I don't know. I was about to curse, but I shouldn't. What on earth were they thinking? God only knows. Okay. What do they think that they're doing by this? I have no idea. And the thing is, this is a gift of BDS because when Ben and Jerry say the occupied territories, they probably mean the West Bank. But when BDS says the occupied Palestinian territories, they actually mean the entire state of Israel. So that's number one. And number two, really just riddle me that. You're boycotting 2.9 million Palestinians and 450,000 Jews, and you're not letting them have their ice cream. Well, great activism, you guys. Great. Middle East problems solved.
They'll probably be healthier in Judea and Samaria.
I know, but this is like pandering to the left, pandering to social justice movements, and they should really know better. Ben and Jerry should know better.
Well, they're probably in that group that could be educated. They're not. They just don't know. They don't know, right?
They probably do know, and they got scared by Twitter. So some HR person or some inclusivity expert in the company came up to them and were like, you guys are I don't know, I'm guessing. But they probably know better, and they just didn't realize how much they're bending backwards and taking the knee to those people that are out to get Israel.
I'm going to try and get 2 or 3 more questions in here. Sam asks, how do we bridge the generational divide when the Pew report, which we never got to, they report 38% of young Jews in the age 18 to 35 believe Israel as an apartheid state?
Education. And I'll take it a step forward. Jewish education needs to change. Young people need to be educated. Young people need to be told the truth. So one of the things that I was telling people, and as growing up as a liberal, I knew the truth, meaning I knew that when the Jews migrated to Israel, back to Israel, and started buying land, that place wasn't empty. Okay. There weren't a lot of people there. There definitely wasn't a state. There definitely wasn't democracy. There was nothing. It was a mess, right? It was a malaria-infested, swamp-riddled mess. But there were people there. So if you don't talk about that in like elementary school and high school, and then you just send people to college, the kids to college, and then in college, they actually learned that they were like, the truth was like bent a little bit, they're going to discredit everything you said. So here's what I say. The moral justification, the indigenous justification for the existence of the state of Israel does not require that we lie. We can tell the truth, and there's still moral justification for the existence of a Jewish state.
Yeah, even I think it's interesting that the study of history, of the Jewish history, gives you a moral clarity that's totally.
Yeah.
You can use that too if you like. Okay, one more question here. Michael asks, are there ways to encourage political leaders to stand up for what's right, even when it is hard for them to do so?
We need to duplicate Richie Torres is the answer. Richie Torres is a congressman from the Bronx. He's half African-American, half Latin. He's gay and a huge supporter of Israel, and he's adjacent to AOC. He's one of our biggest treasures. But we need to show support to politicians because right now they don't have the political incentive to support Israel. They get beaten by the trolls, and they actually don't fundraise as much as we think that they do. So between not fundraising enough and getting politically getting beaten on social media, they're kind of like, do I really need to take that stand? And there aren't a lot of people that are willing to take a very forceful and hard stand on this, like Richie Torres. And we need to be able to, that needs to change. That very much needs to change. And it's a bunch of conversations that I'm also having.
So before I let you go, one final recommendation to everybody, all our viewers, beyond our viewers, what single thing can they do to help fix this problem?
Educate yourself, educate your kids, and have conversations with the people around you.
Noa Tishby, thank you very much. God bless you for the work you're doing.
Thank you.
Continue on with this work. It's amazing. We never got to you as an actor, as a producer, and a particular interest to me as a musician, but that'll have to be a follow-up session. So Noa, thank you. Thank you to everybody for tuning in. We will, unless something urgent happens, I expect we'll be back to you in September, mid-September, with our next Insider Briefing. Mike, I'll turn it over to you to wrap up.
Thank you.
Thank you all for the tremendous honor, thank you, Noa, for the tremendous honor and privilege of hosting you today, and for taking the time to educate and empower us. On behalf of Honest Reporting Canada, our 50,000 subscribers, and believe it or not, about 1,000 people who tuned in today and were in virtual attendance, thank you for everything you do for Israel and for the Jewish people. To our viewers of today's important briefing, thank you all for joining us today. As you know, our efforts are only made possible thanks to your support. Your donations power important events like these and help us to fight media bias against Israel. So if you can consider making a donation today, that would be fantastic. As we conclude, I want to encourage everyone to please diarize our next Insider Briefing, which is on September the 23rd. We're thrilled to be featuring Pulitzer Prize winning journalist from the New York Times, Brett Stevens, who's going to be our keynote speaker. So everyone, thank you all for joining us today. Noa, my hat off to you, and my thanks and appreciation for everything you do for Israel and for the Jewish people. And I wish everyone an amazing rest of the summer. Thank you all.